For over a decade, the costs associated with college tuition and fees have outpaced general U.S. inflation. For individuals faced with the prospect of saving and paying for college, the ability to accurately measure and potentially keep pace with tuition inflation is also increasing. Hello, I'm Paul Murdoch, and joining me today to discuss the innovative S&P Target Tuition Inflation Index are Jodie Gunzberg, Managing Director in S&P DJI's Product Management Group, and Michael Ashton, Managing Principal at Enduring Investments, LLC. Mike, Jodie, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
Thank you.
So Mike, if you can start us off, maybe you can walk us through the economic underpinnings behind the thinking behind the strategy.
Sure. Well, if we're going to go and design a strategy, an index to track college tuition over time, then it's obviously very important for us to understand how are college tuitions set. College tuition is colleges are producing a product just like any other business. It's just that the product is education. And so like any business, they've got expenses and they have revenues. And understanding what are driving those expenses and revenues is an important part of understanding how how to build such an index. So on the expense side, colleges have mostly labor, the main input, but they have a number of other things that go into creating the educational product. And collectively, those things act like general inflation. It's actually somewhat more interesting on the revenue side, where colleges have really two sorts of revenues: internal revenues and external revenues, I guess is the way to think about them. Where internal revenues are government appropriations if it's a public university, or the endowment returns if it's a private university. And then you have the external revenues, which is college tuition. And so understanding how college tuitions vary when the other part, when the appropriations or the endowment returns behave, is where the rubber meets the road in terms of getting this index to mimic actual college tuition inflation.
Great, thanks, Mike. So Jodie, looking at the index itself then, how does the design help it capture the thesis behind the strategy?
As Mike mentioned, there is a relationship on the revenue side between the endowment returns and appropriations versus the tuition inflation growth. And what we're able to do is recognize that there's this large spread of tuition inflation that's above the general inflation measured by the CPI. So we start with the CPI as the base, and then we try to find out what's driving that spread, but knowing something about the relationship of the revenue components helps us do that. So what we've discovered is that it's the real return plus a break-even inflation plus a corporate spread minus an equity risk premium that is really growing in line with the tuition inflation that is inverse to the endowment or appropriation growth.
Okay, so that's the mix and how the mechanics work. How does the index data then compare to, say, maybe a more traditional 60-40 mix?
The 60-40 mix is really designed for optimal diversification, say, in any risk-adjusted return portfolio. But the idea of a college liability is not taken into account in a 60-40 mix. And because there's a relatively short time frame for college savings, the 60-40 mix may be very volatile. So at moments, there's a high chance that you don't meet your tuition inflation. So by moving to the S&P Target Tuition Inflation, you increase your probability by holding this index in order to track the tuition inflation, and you increase it even more the longer you hold it.
Thanks, Jodie. So Mike, maybe you can speak to a couple of the specific economic environments where we might expect the strategy to track tuition inflation most closely.
Sure. So obviously we're trying to design an index that tracks college tuition very well in lots of different economic environments, because we can't really choose the economic environment that we'll be in when our child goes to college. But it's important to understand that that means that the index itself varies with the drivers, the fundamental drivers of college tuition inflation. And so when overall inflation is going higher and the stock market is going lower, so that endowments aren't doing very well and yet the costs of the university are going up, well, that's when you're going to see tuitions going up a little faster, and that's when we would expect the index also to go up a little faster. And conversely, if the stock market has been doing very, very well for a while so that endowments are flush, and yet overall inflation is low, then you'd expect college tuitions to not be going up as much, and you'd expect the index also to not go up as much, but to go up in an amount that's comparable to actually what college tuitions are doing.
Great. Well, thank you, Mike and Jodie, for your insights today on this innovative index.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
To learn more about the S&P Target Tuition Inflation Index and to view the complete methodology, please visit spdji.com. Thank you.